Hi, welcome to Bead Biz. Today we're going to learn how to put beads onto your yarn for a pre-strung beading or crochet project. In order to do this, we will need a bowl of loose beads and some strung beads. These loose beads are size 6/0 check glass silverline crystal. The strung beads are size 6/0 check copperline crystal beads. We will also need some yarn. This is some beautiful yaksha, hand dyed by 100 ravens. And now we're ready to begin. There are a number of ways to put beads on for pre-stringing. Pre-strung beads means you put the beads on the yarn before you cast on, before you cast onto the crochet hook. It doesn't even get to meet the tool you're going to use until the beads are on the yarn. I'm pulling from the outside of this ball. It doesn't matter if it's a center pull or an outside, wherever you're going to start your project, that's where you're going to put your beads. There are several methods to this. The first method I'm going to show you uses a dental flosser. A dental flosser is essentially a little piece of plastic wire with a loop that's flexible and bendable at one end and a point at the other end. I'm going to take my yarn, the end of my yarn, put it through the loop in the dental flosser, pull it down so I have a tail. I'm also going to give myself a little more yarn from this ball so that it doesn't pull out at the bottom. I'm going to take a bead from my bowl. I'm going to put the tip of the dental flosser through the hole in the bead. Then I'm going to push the bead down on the yarn. Because it's flexible, the loop will just collapse as I push the bead over it. I'm going to go all the way down past the tail of the yarn, and I have a bead on there. I can be fancy. I can put more than one bead at a time if I want. All I have to do is line up the holes and slip the point of the dental flosser through both beads and push them down on the yarn. It's kind of like magic. It's just that simple. Now I have them on the yarn. That's the dental flosser. Another method uses a regular sewing needle and a bit of very fine, strong thread. In this case, I use some nylon thread. And I tied a knot in the nylon thread. It's on there. It's really good and tight on there. The important thing here is to tie the knot as tightly and as small as you can, because the bead is going to have to slip over the knot. If the knot is big, the bead won't slip over it. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with the dental flosser. I'm going to insert the tail of the yarn through the loop. I'm going to take the tip of my needle and some beads and put them on the tip of the needle. Push them down onto the yarn, just like that. Now, because the sewing needle has a really fine point and is a little bit firm, I could take this sewing needle and scoop in this bowl, and some beads will just be on the needle. It's physics. Some of those beads are going to point in the right direction to be on your needle, and I can push them right down. When you have beads, any 1,000 beads per se, 1,000 beads, they can be Czech or they can be Japanese. You will find between 2 and 10 beads that are misshapen, that have small holes, that just for whatever reason don't work. If you find one, throw it aside. It's under a penny for any individual bead, and it's not worth the headache of trying to get it down. So again, I can put them on individually. If I have enough in a bowl, which I do here, I can scoop them on like that. The bowl needs to be wide enough at the top that your hand can make a scooping motion, but narrow enough at the bottom that the beads are held together. This is a really, I don't know if you can see that. This is a really narrow bottom bowl. That's just tape on the bowl because the bowl cracked, because this is my favorite beading bowl and I'm not quite ready to give it up yet. It's probably 20 years old, but it's the best bowl I've ever found. It suits me perfectly, so we're just going to go with it, crack and all. All right. These two are not my preferred method. Not my preferred tools, I should say, for this method. My preferred tool is a big eye beading needle. Comes in a package like this. As you see, it's very straight and nice and shiny in this package. Look at how beautiful that looks. After you use it, I'll pull out my one that I'm using currently. It ends up looking sort of like that. It's called a big eye beading needle because the middle opens up into an eye that's really, really big. I can get 2 fingers through that. I could probably force 3 fingers, but I'm not going to. Both of the ends are sealed, so it makes a hole. When you first get it, it will be flat and nice like that. You're going to take your nail, stick it in there, and run it through, and it will open up. Eventually, it will be bent, like mine is very bent, because it conforms to the way you hold it. And I hold mine like this, so it has conformed to that particular configuration. It's basically the same as the other tools. I'm going to take the tail of my yarn. I'm going to put it through the opening. Leave a nice tail there. And then I have my choice. I can either put the beads on one at a time. And again, this wire is really flexible, so it's just, this way so you can see it. It's just going to push the needle together and slide right down. Mine is bent in this configuration because I prefer to scoop my beads. Oops. Come on. To get a bunch of beads on there. Sometimes when you get a bunch of beads on there like that, you'll try and push them down, and for whatever reason, they just won't go. Maybe those few will go, but you won't be able to get that one past the join between the needle and the yarn. That's what I was talking about before. Maybe the hole's a little weird or funky. Just put it aside. You have plenty of beads. There you go, and that's on there. I like this tool better than either the needle method or the dental flosser method. And here's the reasons why. The dental flosser for me is really, really floppy. So if I try and use the dental flosser to scoop the beads, it just never works. It's just too floppy a thing to be able to do that. And eventually, the end here of the circle, the loop, starts to crack because you've been flexing the wire and bending it like that for so long. It either gets a permanent bend in it, which is less problematic, but ultimately that point is the stretch point and it will break and be annoying. Or sometimes it catches on things because the loop is so big and then it just unravels all the way to the top. That's irritating. So I don't really like the dental flosser. I like the needle because it's very stiff. You can see how stiff that is. And I can use it to scoop beads. I dislike it because it has this thread and you have to make sure that the knot goes through. I also dislike it because it's a really pointy needle. And I am forever poking myself with the end of the needle, and you can't even wear a little thimble because it's just not going to work in there. So I always end up poking myself with it. It's slightly stiff, and I'll show you why that matters in a second. So this is not my favorite tool for putting it on. My favorite tool is this because it is stiff, but not too stiff. It doesn't have the problem of breaking so much at the ends, and because it is more flexible than a regular sewing needle, I can do a super cool thing with it. Let's talk about this. Check beads come on a hank. All of these loops are separate strings that come down one side all the way around and back up to the top. Because they're separate loops, they're tied here at the top together in a knot. This means that this string of beads right here, this loop, is independent of the other loops on there. I can, excuse me, there we go, take my needle, my big eye beading needle, run it right down a few beads. While it's still on the string, it can't escape, and pull it through. Now those beads are on my yarn. That means I don't have to have a bowl of beads next to me. It's not going to get knocked over. And I don't have to do the scoopy wrist thing. It's also a lot faster because I don't have to line the beads up or worry they're going to get lined up. I can do 4 or 5 beads at a time and pull right through. And be in there. Now, I did that on purpose to show you the one mistake that you can make when you do this. You see how I went through those first beads? Then I came up the other way. That is the only downside to this. So you can see what I've done is gone through backward. Even with that downside, I can fix it easily by sticking my ball through the hole and pulling the other beads back through like that, and it will turn out just perfect and through the way it should be without any issue whatsoever. Stick that back through there, and I fixed my problem. So the only way that I can mess this up is by coming up instead of going in the same direction. As long as I keep going in the same direction, I can just keep pulling this right through. All right, so what happens if I hit one of those beads that we were talking about that are having issues, that don't want to go through, that are being annoying, that I just can't get it through? Easy enough. I go through, and first off, you never pick up a whole lot of beads at once, 4 or 5 tops. But if I pick up 5 beads, say, I've got 3, we'll do 3 beads, and only 2 of the beads go over this join, pull those one over just fine. It's really easy for me to hop over a bad bead. So if I've done this bead and I know this one here doesn't fit, I haven't tried it, but we'll just pretend it doesn't fit. The hole is for some reason abnormally small or occluded or whatever. I can just skip over that bead and keep right on going. And the fact that that bead, that single bead there, is not on my yarn doesn't really matter. Beads are typically sold in tubes of either 200 or on hanks that have over 1,000 beads on them. One bead in the scheme of things is not going to matter, because I know that you will all have been very smart and gotten a few more beads than you need for your project. Just like you always get a little extra yarn just to make sure that you have enough to finish your project. That's all you're doing. You just keep going through there all the way around. The beads are going to be on both the little white string that they were on and on the working yarn that you're about to knit or crochet. And I'm going to be brave here and do a whole bunch. What have I got there? 2, 4, 6, 8 beads at a time I can do, which is a lot more than you will get from either the scooping method or lining them all up and putting them on one at a time. Because these beads are individually strung, I'm going to stop here for a second. I am in no danger at any point of these beads falling or rolling or coming off in some other way. So when the phone rings and I need to answer it, I can just put this down and walk away. And when I pick it up again, they're all going to be right where I left them. The other advantage is, at least for me, that my cat, I love my cat, I really do. Oreo's a great kitty. But he has an issue. My cat's issue is that he thinks it is his job, he knows it's his job, to personally knock over every bowl on the planet. That means if I have a bowl of beads sitting next to me, my cat will knock it over. Willfully. He will willfully come by, flip the bowl of beads. He can't do that when I'm doing this method. If one of my children becomes overenthusiastic and jumps into my lap, it's okay, because they cannot knock over my beads. When I go to reach for my tea, I do not knock over my bowl of beads. You see a common theme developing here. I really don't like bowls of beads next to me. They make me highly nervous and uncomfortable. That said, when I do have to have a bowl of beads next to me, I always make sure that when I empty the beads from their container or cut the beads off the hank, I empty them into a plastic bowl, not a glass bowl, not a metal bowl. Why not a glass bowl? Why not a metal bowl? Because beads bounce. All right, you can see there what I've done is twist my yarn around and went through it twice, so I'm just going to pull that through, back through, so it doesn't get in my way again. What have I done here? There. Come through there. If you do make a mistake, it's no big deal. It is all easily remedied. There we go. All right, so this bowl is plastic. If I drop beads into it, they are not going to bounce out. They're going to hit the plastic, and the plastic is going to deaden the movement of the beads. That is why I say a plastic bowl. If you were using a bowl that was made of glass or metal, some of those beads would absolutely have bounced right out of them. And that's all there is to it. When you get all the way around, and I am almost all the way around, so I will keep chatting at you while I get all the way around to show you the cool thing that you do at the end. Remember, if you hit a bad bead, and I haven't hit a bad bead yet, if you hit a bad bead, you can always jump over it. All I'm doing is coming through, I'm just running the needle straight down. You can see that, just straight down that whole row of beads, pulling it through the other end. You might come to a point where you haven't let enough yarn out to keep going. That's no problem. If you just pull the yarn, see how that's just coming through like that, feeding off the ball. So you're in no danger at any point of running out of give in your yarn. Just pull more yarn. It will come off the ball. It will be happy, and you can keep going. As I said before, really the only problem you will have with this is if you go in the wrong direction. And even that is easily remedied by putting the ball of yarn through. I say that, and I'm trying to think of other problems that you may encounter. If your yarn is particularly staticky, you might encounter the yarn might stick to itself. You can just pull it apart like you would do if you were knitting and the yarn sticks to itself, no problem. Make sure that's not your problem first before you go through the trouble of putting the ball through, because it could just be that you've got a particularly friendly bit of yarn that is stuck to another particularly friendly bit of yarn. You can see how fast this is, how many beads at a time I'm putting on there. Because I'm getting about 8 beads. If I were doing this method, even if I got a really good group of beads in a row. What do I have there? 2, 4, 6, 7. The other thing about stringing them this way is that you don't have to continually push the beads down, because instead of pushing the beads down, you're pulling the yarn through. What do I mean by pushing the beads down? Well, let me show you. So I have these beads here that I put on with the other methods. In order to get more yarn, I have to push the beads down. This way, the yarn is doing that for me. So I'm giving you a good look at this. Almost done going through here. Again, if there's a problem bead, you say, well, that one doesn't fit, no worries. I've just left one and skipped right over it. Sometimes you'll do that by accident too. Don't worry about it. If you do it by accident and the beads actually do fit on, you can always just throw this last couple of beads on by hand at the end. And I am almost done with an entire round of these beads. People say, oh, this method, it takes so long. Beads are going to take up time no matter which end you do it on. If you pre-string, you're doing all the work up front. If you do the add as you go method where you don't pre-string anything and you use a tool to add the beads onto the stitches as you go along, then the time is taken up in the middle. With pre-strung beads, they are necessarily going to be only seen on one side of your stitch, unless you're doing a particularly loose stitch or a bit of lace work. That's because as you wrap the bead, it's only on one loop of the yarn. It can't be on both legs because I've already put it on the yarn. So if you ever wonder, if you're looking at something and you say, is that a pre-strung piece or was that added as you go? Pull the stitch out a little bit, take a good look at it. If it's only on one leg of the stitch, it is pre-strung. If it is on both legs of the stitch, it was added as you go. All right, now I have gone from one end of this to the other end. You can see there's the loop, there's where I started, and there's where I ended. Now what? Well, I'm going to take my trusty scissor and I'm going to cut the white string. Did I mention I'm cutting the white string? You want the yarn well out of your way, because if you cut the yarn, you will have to start again. So I'm going to cut that white string. I can let go, it doesn't matter, because these beads are on the yarn. There's my yarn going back to my ball. Nothing bad is going to happen. I'm going to get to the white string here. I'm going to cut the white string, let those beads fall. Then I'm going to grab the white string. Are you going to pull out easily? No? All right. I'll show you how to deal with that. So here's the beads I put on with the other methods. Here's my yarn coming out of my ball. I'm going to wrap it a little bit just so you can get a clear view that I've put it onto the ball. Now what? Well, here's my other end. So I have my ball of yarn, all my beads, including the ones that I didn't put on the string, all the way around to the end with the needle. I'm going to let the needle go for now. And now is the time that I'm going to push the beads down. And as I push the beads down, the white string is going to become very visible. And once the white string is long enough, I'll be able to just pull the white string out and throw it away. I will continue to push the beads away from the end. You don't want to push them toward the needle because that's the end of your yarn. You want them to stay on your yarn. So you're going to push them down toward the ball. Now I have put close to 200 beads onto my yarn, just like that. When you're done adding your beads, you come back here, you remove your needle, all right, at some point here I managed to go through the yarn, no big deal. I'll just take it off the needle, whichever way it comes off. Maybe it comes off that way. Yeah, that way, fine. And I'm going to pull it off. Whoops, other way. So I removed the big eye needle, and now I have a ball of yarn with lots of beads on it, and I'm ready to start knitting or crocheting. How do I know how many beads to string on to my yarn? Check the pattern. The pattern will tell you how many. Whatever number the pattern gives you, add at least 10 more. Why should I add at least 10 more? Because probably you've miscounted. And if you haven't miscounted, the worst thing that's going to happen is you have more beads on the ball than you need. If you end up with a few extra beads and you're done and you cast off And you have a beautiful project that's beaded and gorgeous and all sorts of shiny and nice. And you have a few extra beads at the end. That doesn't matter. You just take them off the end of the yarn, slide them down, and store them somewhere for next time. What if I skipped a bead and I didn't mean to? Rethread your big eye beading needle, grab the beads that you skipped that were just an accidental skip. Don't try and add the beads that didn't go on the yarn, because they will still not go on the yarn, and slide them on. Those are the 3 that I skipped when I was showing you how to skip beads. So every last one of those beads went on, and that's as it should be. I am not surprised, but it doesn't happen very often that you find even 2 beads out of 1,000 that don't fit. Usually all 1,000 fit just fine, whether they're Czech or Japanese. I am annoyed if there are more than 10, because that means that somebody who threaded these originally was asleep at the switch. If you find that you have a lot of beads that really just aren't fitting or really hard to get on, the odds are good that you have the wrong size bead for your yarn. But that's a different video entirely, where we talk about what size, how do you know what size beads to get for what size yarn. This is the end of the video that explains to you how to put on the beads on the yarn for a pre-stringing project. Now you are ready to cast on and start knitting, because now you have a lovely end where you can cast onto your needles, start knitting, and pull the beads up as you go. So the beads are on there, you're knitting along, you're crocheting along, you just slide the bead up to where you need it and make your stitch. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. We are Bead Biz. You can reach us at jean@beadbiz.org. You can come to our website, beadbiz.org. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram or on Ravelry, or on Instagram, Pinterest, Ravelry, Facebook, and Twitter. There we go. I've got them all. I'm rolling this up because that's usually what I do if I'm not ready to start a project. I just kind of reball it and put it aside for later. The 3 tools we used. This is called a dental flosser. You buy that in the dental departments of a grocery store or a box store or a pharmacy. We used a regular needle, just a regular old sewing needle. You can get wherever you purchase a sewing needle, and a little piece of very strong nylon thread. And we used a big eye beading needle, which you can buy on our website at beadbiz.org. I will show you one last thing, and that's beading needles come in 2 sizes. The 2-inch size and the 5-inch size. There's absolutely no difference except one is smaller and one is bigger. In this demonstration, I used the smaller one because I like it better. You might like the larger one better. Either one is fine. They both work the same. And they are both perfectly acceptable tools for beading and crocheting. I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was a lot of fun for me. And check out our YouTube site, Bead Biz on YouTube. We will show you some other cool tips and tricks for how to knit and crochet with beads. Have a great day.